2. Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. I feel like I'm in a little bit of a Three Stooges episode trying to untangle myself from all of the purple rope lights that I have here. It's Festivus for the rest of us. I've got my beautiful lava lamp here from Sporticulture, my dear friend Court on the set. I'm drinking out of my Strategic Factory cup and trying not to knock over my Royal Farms Rofo coffee cup with my purple rope lights. Luke Jones joins us now. Luke, I purchased these purple rope lights back in 2006. I had about 3 strands brought together. My wife put them all together for me so the room would glow. We have a new camera here with a wide lens. It gets in my beautiful Mike Flanagan Cuba Orioles a poster that I cherish. It's a part of my life and now part of everybody else's life. I brought Art Modell to the forefront here. I can make art glow in purple on the internet, as the purple glow goes. And I brought the Brian Billick poster in, holding the Super Bowl trophy. Men, it's time to win a Super Bowl. I mean, we got the Tennessee Titans in. I'm feeling like Banshees and Spears and stuff going on here, and find the son of a bitch and all that stuff. Man, I'm worked up, dude. I'm flying to Miami. We're putting parties together. We've got multiple buses already. I've got hundreds of hotel rooms in South Florida. Whew, I'm going to breweries, talking about parties that you're going to drink. What's your favorite kind of beer, Luke? What beer would you drink if you could drink a beer at the Funky Buddha Brewery in Oakland Park in Fort Lauderdale? What would you drink?
Boy, you're putting me on the spot.
Would it be purple?
Yeah. I mean, I always thought back to the week in New Orleans. Started off the week with the Purple Haze. Purple Haze. Down in Louisiana.
We did local. We went local, and that worked out perfectly, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was a good week. So there were a few of those that were consumed over the course of the week. Mixed in with plenty of work, of course. But yeah,
and hydration. Just like the water boy.
Hydrated. Gotta enjoy yourself. Amidst the long hours of covering a Super Bowl team.
Well, there is just nothing like anybody they ask, where are our hotels? Well, 15 miles from a swamp, because that's kind of, where they all are in South Florida. Look, man, I'm all worked up, and, people give me a hard time about going down to Miami and doing all this stuff. The legwork needs to be done. It's now set with the Tennessee Titans. We're going to sit here and talk football all week about how we should win, but boy, there were a lot of hurt feelings, and it was a long week off, right? Like, Marvin Lewis is flying to see Danny and hanging out with Jarrah. And, Mike McCarthy's looking for a gig, and college coaches are settling in for gigs. And Josh McDaniels is going to coach somewhere, and the Cleveland Browns are in business again to find another leader. And here goes Greg Roman to interview in Owings Mills in the dead of the night with the Browns. All of this is going to happen, and the focus needs to stay in. And, I'll tell you what, the Eagles, the Saints, I mean, these teams that got sort of hijacked over the weekend and had their seasons derailed, it makes for the Patriots, long, tough locker cleanouts this week. And these are the cautionary tales, I think, for the Ravens and for focus.
No question about it. I mean, it all can be so fleeting. It can end just like that. I mean, think about, I'm glad that you mentioned the Patriots, because look at what they're dealing with. I mean, this is a team that has been the standard, whether it's always been on the up and up or not. They've been the standard the last 2 decades, and now
they didn't cheat enough this year.
Right. Although the Cincinnati Bengals might beg to differ. But you look at where they are now, what happens with Tom Brady, and I think to bring this back to the context of talking about Greg Roman and Wink Martindale, now what happens with Josh McDaniels? One of the things that we see this all the time, this happened with Marvin Lewis way back when, Chuck Pagano with Indianapolis after the Ravens lose the heartbreaker in New England. There's kind of the two ways of thinking about it. One, if you have that first-round bye, that gives your coordinators that chance to interview, gives them some time to do that. But then the other side of it is if you keep winning, the odds of you losing your coordinators tends to go down. So if you're someone sitting there worried about Greg Roman potentially being hired away, although I don't think there's, at least at this point, so much buzz that's a foregone conclusion that that's going to happen. Same with Wink Martindale, who talked to the Giants over the weekend. But you don't get the sense, at least at this point, that he's the odds-on favorite. But you keep winning, then the odds tend to go down that you're going to lose those guys. But this time of year is just so crazy in that regard that if the Ravens somehow go out and play their worst game of the season on Saturday night and get upset, then it's kind of open season on losing your two coordinators. So, Josh McDaniels is a good example of that now with New England. In addition to all the, is Brady going to stay or leave or retire or whatever. So you try to keep a singular focus, as you mentioned, and certainly that was the Ravens, not necessarily a challenge last week, but that's the priority, that you want to keep the focus. And I thought Lamar Jackson brought a nice, a moment of humor where he was asked about Greg Roman, and he just said, "Look, we've got work to do here. These other teams need to chill. They can talk to him when we're all done, but we need him now. We need him focused. We need to be focused." And Lamar, it was a light tone that he was taking on there, but it is very much a sense of everything else that goes on with bye week. And you just mentioned how busy we've been as far as getting ready for a potential trip to Miami and bringing Ravens fans down there and all the logistics involved. The organization has to prepare for a trip to Miami. It's not as though you win the AFC Championship, and then Sunday night you're just...
Chris Pike assured me that I would not be the only one from Baltimore in South Florida making plans this week, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, it's not a jinx. It's not putting the cart before the horse. It's just being prepared. You're doing your due diligence, and the Ravens have to do all that, and they did all that this past week. I mean, we can all remember Brian Billick famously talking about when they clinched a playoff spot against the Chargers, how at that point he and the coaching staff put together the itinerary all the way through Tampa. Even though it was weeks and weeks away. I mean, you have to be prepared in that way. But to bring it back to where the Ravens are specifically right now, the singular, or not singular because it's not, I just contradicted myself saying that, but the paramount focus needs to remain on winning. And, we can prepare for a trip to Miami. You and I will be there regardless of what happens. But, for the organization, you have everyone taking care of the logistics of a potential trip to Miami. But John Harbaugh and his coaching staff, what did they do this past week? They were preparing for their divisional round opponent. They spent more time on Tennessee than the other two teams because they had already played the Texans and the Bills. So in that regard, you just ramp up preparations this week. The players last week practiced against each other. It was much more of a, I don't know if training camp feel is the right term, but certainly they were focused on themselves because you're not going to have your players game planning for an opponent who may not even come to fruition. But now, knowing that they're playing the Titans, the focus becomes beating Tennessee, and it's that simple. And as much as you, in the back of your mind, you're thinking about the possibilities that lie ahead, it can all end so quickly. So, and the Ravens found that out in 2011. They were better in 2011 than they were in 2012, but the best team doesn't always win, and that's why you have to have the proper urgency. And as much as you're working on some of the long-term possibilities, and you have to be prepared for that, John Harbaugh, he's going to have his guys focused on the task at hand, and that's the Tennessee Titans on Saturday night.
Here's Luke Jones, Luke at WNST.net. We got some new lighting and a new camera here and new purple Festivus lights for the 2020 March. We are going to be down in Miami. I want to remind everyone, Sam Cook joining us on Tuesday night at Greenmount Station in Hampstead. If you're in the vicinity, come on out, have a crab cake, celebrate Festivus with us. In talking about the end of days in various places, and places like New Orleans where they had their feelings hurt, certainly up in Philadelphia where I don't know that anybody thought they were necessarily going to catch lightning in a bottle. You start to wonder about where the danger lies here this weekend for the home teams that have sat around, and rust versus rest, and the things we'll talk about with the 06 team. But in Minnesota moving on the way they did, Houston moving on the way they did in expected fashion, but albeit in an unexpected way in Deshaun Watson at the end. But where are the vulnerabilities for the home teams here this weekend? And what would make the Ravens vulnerable? You know, we're going to get a weather forecast before it's all over with. I mean, the Ravens have played in the worst weather you can imagine, right? Like, so I heard Russell Wilson talking about going to Green Bay and seeing snow and not even knowing where he was going, quite frankly, after not watching the afternoon game. So, I mean, it's a time of year for focus. But, you know, for the Patriots, that's going to be a soap opera. We're going to be reading about that all week, and all that's going to linger right on into whomever we're talking about in Miami. Hopefully, it's us, Tom Brady, and the Patriots, and what happens to Drew Brees now that he's not in the tournament. You know, these were sort of major lumps for these organizations.
No question. I mean, because you have quarterbacks that are either in their 40s or right in that territory where just don't know how much longer you're going to have. You don't know how many shots you're going to have. I mean, all right, I'll hear an argument that the Patriots can't let Tom Brady go, I suppose, but he's going to be 43 in August. I mean, he's not getting better at this point. He, at best, is staying the same. Now, you could say, well, put some better wide receivers around him, and certainly they did not have skill talent like they've had in past years. I think that's obvious, but how does that work with the idea of how Belichick has been so unemotional about letting go of veteran players a year too early rather than a year too late? I mean, that's why New England's been part of why they've been so good for so long. They have been willing to make those tough decisions in a similar way to how the Ravens have done that with certain guys over the years. But it's a little bit different when you're talking about a quarterback that is, if not the greatest of all time, certainly one of the 2 or 3 greatest of all time. When you look at the Super Bowls and the accolades and everything, but how does that all fit? And on the flip side, he's been someone that's taken so many discounts, hometown discounts for them over the years, and the overall sense you get is he doesn't want to do that again. But it's one thing to have a 37 or 38 or 39-year-old quarterback that is playing at a little bit of a discount. Do you want to do that with a guy who's going to be 43?
But do the Chargers want to give him $42 million next year too? I mean,
yeah, I mean, and I think that's a fascinating possibility because of how desperate they are to create any semblance of a footprint in Los Angeles. I think there might be a better argument for them, even if it's not really even that much about football, but just buzz.
Can they put the gold pants on and run him around like Johnny Unitas and have the Steelers smear him?
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's what's kind of funny. I heard people over the weekend, and look, this is something that's been talked about off and on, the last 2 or 3 months. I mean, it's been talked about. Adam Schefter's talked about it on some of the ESPN studio shows and what have you, but I hear people say, how could Tom Brady finish his career elsewhere? Well, Joe Montana did it. Johnny Unitas did it. Brett Favre did it. I mean, it's not
twice.
Yeah, it's not that unusual. It'd be weird. Don't get me wrong, but I'm not going to sit here and try to act like I'd be stunned by that.
Yeah, only Ray Lewis didn't do it. Now that we go back, right? Like literally, Ed Reed ran around in Titans pajamas, and I mean, like. Yeah.
Yeah, there are more guys now who don't do that than guys who do finish their career with
That's
one.
correct. That is Terrell Suggs running around with that red bird on his helmet and playing for the Chiefs this weekend.
And I always think, you're ruining your legacy. That's a bunch of
That's so Brooks Robinson, right?
I mean, look, I think it's awesome when players still do that, but I don't think I don't think Ed Reed's legacy was tainted one iota by taking a payday with Houston. Look, in hindsight, should he, from a playing standpoint, should he have just retired? Sure, why not? Yeah, he wasn't Ed Reed anymore, but
the $4.2 million that he has in his bank account now.
His bank account would tell you otherwise, and that's where I have no problem with the player doing that.
And he would tell you he was underpaid for 3 years by the Ravens because he was a safety, not a corner.
Oh, I mean, we remember that annual summer saga where he would talk about retirement and wanting a new contract in the same breath. I mean, it was hilarious. But, hey, it's fine, and Ed's still as beloved as ever here in Baltimore.
I love the Santa Claus memes. They were perfect.
Yeah, no question. So, I mean, again, when you have these conversations, when you're talking about whether it's a team that's at the end, whether this was the official end of the Patriots dynasty or not. We know that it was at least very close to the end, right? I mean, Tom Brady's not playing until he's 55, so you knew it was almost over, whether it truly is or not. On the flip side, you have the Ravens with Lamar Jackson, who turns 23 this week. You know, he's younger than Joe Burrow, the Heisman Trophy winner, who's going to play for a national championship over the next week. But at the same time, you also know that just because someone's young and just because you have a young roster and cap space and draft picks and you look like you have a window that's opening up that's going to be there for a few years, we've also seen those examples of teams that look like they're starting a dynasty, and then 2 years later, what happens? I mean, look, I think the Eagles are such a great example of that.
I think the Carolina Panthers are the best
example.
example.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, you have these quarterbacks that have great years, guys that are MVPs.
Not to mention every Jameis Winston who's never going to get there, or Matt Ryan who took 10 years to get there and lost it. All these guys that it sort of slipped away like sand between their hands, right? And here's Brady hanging on, looking to get $40 million from the Chargers, right?
Right. I mean, it's just, but it all can go away so quickly. That's why I've said all along that the Ravens, not that I think they have this attitude, or not that I think fans have the attitude. I mean, fans can think about it how they want. It's not going to impact how the team plays, but this idea that they're going to have this great opportunity over the next several years. And look, I expect that, but I also don't. I'm not a fortune teller. I don't know what's going to happen if Greg Roman leaves, or if Wink Martindale leaves, or if this player and that player leave in free agency, and the guy they bring in is a disaster, or so-and-so gets hurt. I mean, you don't really know, and that's why when you're sitting there at 14-2 and you have home field advantage, and there's only...
The time is now.
Yeah, there's only a couple teams that you can point to that you really feel is a legitimate threat even, let alone trying to look at the whole field. And
well, you better consider the Tennessee Titans a threat this weekend. Right?
Well, and that's where you have to have the proper mindset, and that's why, as much as last week we talked about this, and it'll still be a talking point at least until kickoff, at least until we see the Ravens in the first quarter on Saturday night. That's why you do talk about that rest versus rust thing, and it can be a real thing if you feed into it. There's no question about that, and that has nothing to do with how you handle Week 17. It has everything to do with how you handle the 13 days from Week 17 until you kick off on Saturday night, the 11th. I mean, that's how it works. And that's where you do have a lot of trust with the veteran, experienced coach who is very detail-oriented in everything they do. That's where...
And there's 30 guys on this team that got their ass kicked last year and remembers that walk back to the car and how that night of sleep went on Saturday. They want to sleep well Saturday night, play well Saturday night, right?
No question. But so much goes into that, not just mindset, but preparation, nutrition, how guys have handled their workout regimen over the last week plus, and now going into a regular practice week, so to speak. All of those different factors matter. All of those different things are variables that determine how you're going to play on Saturday night. And there are no guarantees. And we've seen crazy upsets. There were a couple upsets. I mean, I don't think anyone expected the Vikings to beat the Saints. Not that I thought the Saints were completely invincible, but...
I think Kirk Cousins pointed that out in the postgame, too, or was it Thielen? I don't know who it was, but maybe it was the big tight end. Either way, everybody counted us out. Yeah, they did. Sure. I mean, that's, you're the Minnesota Vikings for crying out loud, right?
Right. I mean, and Kirk Cousins can't win a big game.
Skull.
Drew Brees, has won Super Bowl, won a Super Bowl and is a Hall of Famer. But all it takes is a 3-hour period where one team plays their best football and the superior team doesn't play their best football. And you can have some cases where you play your worst football. I've said it. I don't think the Ravens, if they play their normal game, their kind of typical Ravens performance, I don't think the Tennessee Titans can beat them. But if the Tennessee Titans play really well and the Ravens kind of come out lethargic, and not that they're lacking focus, but you can tell that they're rusty, and there's possibility of rain, and you get a turnover, a special teams play, what have you, then that's a different animal. And this isn't the World Series where it's a best of 7. You play for 3 hours and you're either advancing or you're going home. I mean, it's very sudden. It is very abrupt, and the Ravens have experienced this. I mean, Every team has at some point in time. I think in New England, go back to Week 17 even. Week 16, remember what happened Saturday night. They beat Buffalo. They kind of look like the Patriots again, right? Brady looked the best he'd looked in a while. Their defense played well. They ran the ball. They look like, okay, here's the Patriots emerging from their late season slumber, and then what happened? They lay an absolute egg against Miami, and 6 days later, they're going home. They're done. So
there are Patriot beat writers that have covered the team for like a decade that have never seen them clean a locker out.
Yeah, it had been 10 years since Ray Rice did what he did against them in Foxborough, and Joe Flacco throws 10 passes, and the Ravens just completely destroyed them.
I'd like to have this problem for 10 years in a row planning Super Bowl parties. Although, as an addendum, they're all going to be in Vegas and L.A., so we're not going to be doing any buzzing. This is your last great chance. Please win these games,
Yeah, if you're looking for a destination that's not going to be, something where you have to fly across the country, it's a pretty good opportunity in that way. But it's really tough to do this, and that's where, if you're someone that's thinking about it through a little more of a concerning lens, that's where you look at this and say, gosh, the Ravens have won 12 in a row. The Orioles have lost a game more recently than the Ravens. That's just astonishing to think about that. And at the same time, how much longer can that go on? How much longer can they go without having a hiccup? And that's where, not to be gloom and doom, I'm just understanding the reality of it, the magnitude of it, the difficulty of it. That's where you do really have to lean on your preparation and the maturity of the locker room, and having a 12th-year head coach who's been to and won a Super Bowl and been to AFC championship games and has all that experience. And you lean on your veterans. You lean on a Marshall Yanda. You lean on a Sam Cook. You lean on some of those other guys in that locker room. There aren't too many left from the 2012 team, but some of them are left, and you lean on some of those guys, and you lean on an Earl Thomas who hasn't done that here in Baltimore, but he did it in Seattle. So that's where you lean on some of those guys, and you just hope that your younger players all recognize that, hey, I need to be ready because it's not just me here. It's 52 other guys counting on me, and if you have that kind of mindset, then the Ravens should be fine. Certainly this week. Again, we could get to Kansas City potentially when next week comes around and both teams have advanced the way people expect. But this weekend was a great example of just because you expect something to happen doesn't mean it's going to happen. And the New Orleans Saints are the best example of that. And the Patriots, to some degree. I can't say I'm stunned that the Titans went into Foxborough and beat the Patriots, and that says as much about the Patriots as anyone else. But hey, there are no guarantees, and we'll revisit this a week from now, assuming the Ravens are actually moving on, and we're not talking about locker clean out and a major disappointment, because it can be over that quickly, and that's what makes this so great, and that's what makes this scary if you're a Ravens fan. Not because of the Titans being scary, but just understanding how difficult it is to win in this league.
Well, I tell you what, the former Houston Oilers are coming to town here as the Tennessee Titans. I had to look up the Super Bowls for the next 5 years, right? Do you know where they're all going to be? I remember Tampa got one, and it's next year. So it's both in Florida. So Miami this year, Tampa next year. Then they go to L.A. in 22. Yeah. I think they delayed that. Originally, they were going to go to L.A. in 21, and they backed it up a year. And then so 22 is L.A., 23 is Arizona, and 24 is New Orleans. So I would think 25 would be thinking back toward Vegas, Los Angeles, and then I guess 27, 28 will be in London, right?
Yeah. or whoever's building a new stadium in the next.
And the Jaguars and the Chargers will be hosting it before it's all over with. Here's Luke Jones, Luke at WNST.net. We're getting ready for this game this week. We're looking at all the intangibles, as they would say. We're getting together with Sam Cook on Tuesday night out at Greenmount Station. I'm down in Miami. If you want to join us on our sojourn to South Florida in 2 weeks, nasty at WNST.net. We have hundreds of people on the interest list there as well. Luke, I know you're still a believer, right? I know you're going to pick the Ravens this week.
Yeah.
Give me a nightmare scenario where you and I are holding hands and praying at 11:15 for some 52-year yard field goal by Tucker to get us through. Like, what's a scenario here? To me, it's Derrick Henry not being tackled. Clearly dragging guys would be a problem. Breaking tackles would be a problem. And ball security for me is always, the game the Ravens lose or get eliminated will be the game that they play Butterfingers with the football. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's Lamar. It means what happened to Tom Brady at the end of the game. Not that they were going to win the game with 14 seconds left, but that sort of deflection, ball goes up in the air, bad things. We've had black punts, we've had missed kicks. We're going to talk to Sam Cook about that kind of stuff in recent weeks. So there have been some lessons for the Ravens that haven't come at the expense of the operation in Buffalo, against San Francisco, in close games where they've had to do some things. They've checked all the boxes except coming back from catastrophe, which they haven't done since the Cleveland catastrophe 14 weeks ago.
Sure. And you really just spelled out a lot of it. You look at what Tennessee does well. They run the football extremely well. I think they were third in the league in rushing yards this season. Derrick Henry, they want to run with him. They want to limit the opportunities for Ryan Tannehill. I think with him, he's the kind of guy that's less is more, and that's taken nothing away from him. He's had go look at his numbers. He's had a good season, and he's played well, and he's been a really nice story. But they very clearly, the blueprint for the Titans is to make Derrick Henry the reason why they win, and then Tannehill to complement him with what they like to do as far as taking some shots with play action, things of that nature that he's done really well with. But it comes down to the Ravens not taking, I don't want to say not taking it seriously, but not realizing that this is different than the regular season. They've just steamrolled so many teams, and the difference now is in January, one, everyone's good. Even the worst teams in the playoffs are still pretty good. They're not championship caliber. I don't think the Tennessee Titans are championship caliber by any stretch. I don't think they're all that close. But understanding where you are, understanding the urgency that you need to have, and then it comes down to taking care of the football. You just said it. If there's a formula for the Ravens to be beaten, it's another fumble at the mesh point, which we did see a little bit of that at the end of the season. Not that it was an over-the-top problem, but we saw Gus Edwards have a fumble in each of the last two games. We saw a fumble at the mesh point between Lamar Jackson and Mark Ingram. Those have been so few and far between, and that's not to say that fumbling suddenly becomes contagious, but it is one of those things where inevitably you're going to have some of that over the course of a season, and you hope that it isn't going to, you hope there isn't a market correction in the postseason for that, because that's the formula for that being an issue. We've talked a lot about the Ravens' run defense, even though I thought they did a fantastic job against Nick Chubb in Cleveland in Week 16, but that kind of back, which you think of Derrick Henry, he's this big, hulking back that you don't want to tackle, but when you really look at when he's at his best, a lot of times it's those edge runs where he cuts back then. And the Ravens have had some issues with those types of backs, whether it was Chubb early in the season, Raheem Mostert. Buffalo with Singletary did a little bit of that as well. So not that it's a terrible run defense, but when you look at the Ravens in terms of run defense efficiency, they've been a little more middle of the pack. Their yards per carry allowed middle of the pack. So if you turn the ball over or you give up a big play on special teams, something that kind of flips the score a little bit, and the Ravens are the team that's down 13-3 compared to the other way around, then that just feeds into Tennessee continuing to feed the ball to Henry, and then your front wears down, and before you know it, Tannehill hits A.J. Brown on a play action kind of play. That's the scenario. Put it this way, I can't see any way that the Ravens would lose it by multiple scores or anything crazy like that. What the Chargers did to them last January, the Titans aren't doing that, period. I would be stunned by that. But if you make mistakes and you're not as efficient and you put the ball on the turf or you give up a return in special teams, then, yeah, you might be trailing by 4 points in the fourth quarter, and then you're counting on perfection and being precise and efficient down the stretch. And look, I have no reason to think the Ravens couldn't do that, even if they're in that scenario, but they haven't been in that scenario very often, so it would be different. So are there scenarios where they could lose? Sure. Do I think it's going to happen? No, I don't. In fact, I think it's far more likely the Ravens win by 10-plus points than they are to lose, but it's a non-zero chance of them losing. So when it's non-zero, that means, yeah, you do have to take it seriously and come out and handle your business and have the proper amount of respect for your opponent and start fast and step on their neck when you have the opportunity to do that. And the Ravens have done that for the better part of 12 straight weeks, 12 straight wins. So
no reason to doubt them. Vegas isn't, right?
Exactly. I mean, a 10-point spread in the playoffs, that's pretty unique territory right there, but it speaks to the amount of respect, not just that the Ravens are getting, but it's the amount of respect they deserve. I mean, this is a great football team, and they're going up against a good football team, pretty good. So you look at it in terms of just that real simplistic assessment. Well, the great team playing at home should beat the pretty good team playing on the road, especially a pretty good team coming off of an emotional, draining kind of win in New England. I think that's another factor to keep in the back of your mind as well as we get closer to kickoff. So are there scenarios? Sure. But I see far more scenarios where the Ravens just come out and don't even have to play their best football. Just play Ravens football. Just play a solid brand of their kind of football, and I don't think they'll have any problem there.
Oh, I hope it's that easy. It wasn't that easy for everyone else. My heart, my head can't take it. Nasty at WNST.net if you want to get to our Miami waiting list. We're excited. I'm heading down to South Florida for a couple days. I will not be sunning myself, although I will hopefully get some sunshine for Saturday night. We're going to be with Sam Cooke at Green Mountain Station on Tuesday night. Hope you join us for that. We're on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Snapchat and Instagram and streaming live. And Luke's on the backfields at Owings Mills. And we are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, broadcasting from the Purple Ropelet studio. And we never stop talking. Festivus 3 and Purple Rain 3.